Thank you, everyone, for joining us here at the beautiful Dream Theater in Russell, Kansas. I'm Chapman Rackaway, Professor of Political Science at FHSU, and it's my pleasure to have two of the candidates for the Big First Congressional District here in Western Kansas present with us today. Sending his regrets is Kerry Burt, Libertarian nominee, but we are very fortunate to have Republican nominee Roger Marshall of Great Bend and independent candidate Alan LaPolice of Clyde, both here joining us for this town hall today. Our format will be conducted in the following fashion. Each candidate will give a 2-minute opening statement. We will begin then asking questions. Each candidate will get 90 seconds to answer the question, followed by a 90-second response from his opponent. We'll alternate the order of asking questions. Now, to be fair to both of the candidates and to prevent filibustering, I will keep close time at 90 seconds per response and 2 minutes for the opening statements, and I will cut anyone off who exceeds their allotted time. At the end of the debate, each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. With all of that said, let's begin. After a coin toss prior to debate, the winner was Alan LaPolice, who chose to go second. Therefore, we'll begin with the opening statement for Dr. Roger Marshall.
Good afternoon, everybody in Russell, Kansas. It's always great to be back here. Feel very much at home. I've delivered many patients from Russell, Kansas. I have so many friends in the community as well. As you all know, I'm a physician and obstetrician. Over the past 2 years, my family and I have traveled almost 40,000 miles. I've been to, I believe, 104 different communities. And what the people tell me their biggest issues, their biggest concerns is the economy, national security, and health care. Health care is the number 3 concern of Kansans as well as everybody across this country. I tried to listen and have literally had a cup of coffee with several thousand people and tried to develop policy that makes sense and to bring about solutions. During this debate today, I hope to bring forth ideas and solutions that the different Kansans have told me about. From a job standpoint, from an economy standpoint, the number 1 concern in this country that's holding down our economy is government overregulation. Whether you're in healthcare, in banking, in agriculture, in oil industry, government overregulation is holding jobs down, keeping us from growing our companies and adding input cost. From a national security standpoint, it's hard for me to believe that in central Kansas, in the center of the country, that people can be fearful and that are so concerned about national security. I believe in peace through strength. I believe that we have lost our reputation internationally, and we need a strong military to protect us and to grow back our reputation. To talk about health care just for a second, I believe that we need to repeal the Affordable Care Act and incrementally replace it, though, with solutions. Very simple solutions like letting health care be bid across state lines, letting health care be portable, expanding health care savings accounts, tort reforms, and on and on. There can be simple solutions, taking one bite of the apple at a time. I think I'm just going to stop there and look forward to your questions. Very much, we'll say, focused on my policy and issues and trying to talk about solutions that we're going to bring if we're elected to represent you in the United States Congress. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Marshall. Mr. LaPolice, 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alan LaPolice. I am an independent candidate from Clyde. I want you to take a moment to think about that. Independent candidate from Clyde. Different, right? Doesn't sound the same. It's not Republican. It's not Democrat. It's independent. Like the Founding Fathers. Like this country was intended to be. Our Declaration of Independence. A bunch of rebels and rowdy men and women fought to create something new. And over the past 240 years, that something has changed. The major issue in Washington isn't healthcare. It's not defense. It's not the economy. The major issue in Washington is that we don't trust Washington. That's the truth. We don't trust the politicians. The reason for the presidential election being what it is because we have 2 candidates that we don't trust. We feel that the whole thing is separate from us. There's a political class, there's the DC Beltway, and then there's everybody else. And we are part of the everybody else. Now we can send more Republicans to try and fix it. And I ran 2 years ago as a Republican, but I ran with the Republican values of limited but effective government, fiscal responsibility, stronger defense, and family values. But I argue that the Republican Party no longer espouses those values. They don't know what that means anymore. They only know win this election, gear up for the next election, win this election, raise money, win the next election. That's it. That's what we have, and that's the real problem in Washington. Independent is different. I'm doing something remarkably different. And until we do something different, like Dr. Marshall says, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. And we keep pounding our head on this brick wall, sending the same kind of candidates, the same kind of politicians, with the same kind of tired messages. Nothing is different. Nothing is going to change until we change it. I'm running as an outsider. We all want an outsider to win. Everything that I'm going to tell you today is honest, it's honorable, and it's based in fact and reason. And it can work, but you have to take the first step. You have to be brave, be courageous, and do what I did, and take a leap of faith, and do something different. I'm Alan LaPolice, and I'm running as an independent for Congress.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much both for those opening statements. And I'd like to start my opening question, which will go to Dr. Marshall. Again, 90 seconds now for your responses. But I'd like to play off of something that Mr. LaPolice was saying in his opening statement, because as not only as an analyst of politics, but as a concerned citizen myself, I look at the high negatives that the public has towards our presidential nominees. And not only that, to Congress as well. A recent Gallup poll had Congress's approval rating at 12%. Clearly, there is a disconnect between our political leaders and the sentiment of the public. As the branch closest to the people, I believe it's imperative that Congress lead the way in restoring public trust. What can you do as an elected representative to restore public trust in not just the presidency, but all of our federal institutions? We start with 90 minutes for Dr. Roger Marshall. 90 seconds.
So, Dr. Rackways, I understand, what can Roger Marshall do to restore trust? I think the basis of any relationship between a patient and their physician is trust. And I think for 25 years, people of Central Kansas have entrusted me and their babies to my care. And I think my job as a politician is no different. All this time I've spent meeting thousands of people is growing a relationship. And then I think the second part of that is doing what I say and saying what I do, the consistency. You know, I love the sign that says, if all else fails and you're trying to show that you're a Christian, talk to them. But I hope my actions are very, very consistent with what I believe in. So I think I'll let you judge me by my actions and my results. Certainly, as I'm not a politician, I've never ran for public office. I am an outsider as well, have no connections at all to this big beast that we're talking about. So I think people will find me very different, a person of the people and from the people.
All right, then, we'll give 90 seconds to Mr. LaPolice. If you might extrapolate a little bit more from your opening statement about what you see your position is as a candidate and as a potential representative.
I first want to respond to that, and you know, Roger's a good guy. I've known him for 2 years now. But don't tell me that you're an outsider when the Chamber of Commerce puts $1 million into your campaign. They ran with you for this seat. This big monster you're talking about is called the establishment, and the establishment is backing you 100%. You're doing fundraisers with Senior Senator Pat Roberts. You've got millions of dollars flowing into your campaign. And you can't say that you're an outsider when you've already met with Speaker Paul Ryan and you're already in D.C. part of the time with your legislative staff. That's not an outsider, folks. They don't back outsiders. They don't want outsiders because the politics of D.C. is it's its own animal, and they preserve themselves over everything else. They will ruin this country. They will put us into tragic, catastrophic debt. We have $19.5 trillion in debt, never mind the unfunded liabilities of $109 trillion. Plus there's mortgage debt, plus there's student debt, plus there's medical debt. They are not changing anything. And as a candidate, you can't change that if you get elected with the exact same mechanism. Now, I'm running a low-budget campaign. I have one paid staffer, and my wife and my daughter, and we are outsiders, and we raised such little money that we can barely afford the gas to get to these events, and then the commercials that I have to create in my laundry room. So I'm an outsider. What will I do to change that trust issue? First, set term limits, because it's not a career.
I'm sorry, I need to stop you there. That's been 90 seconds. Thanks to Julie for keeping us honest there, and we'll give you plenty of opportunities to revisit those topics later on, but because of our time frame, we do need to move on, and there are so many important things for us to discuss. Let's move into a bit more of a detailed issue. And let's talk about one of the things that people seem to be focusing on quite a bit on the campaign trail. Tax policy is one of the most significant areas of disagreement confronting Congress today. Democrats want to close loopholes for those at the top end of the pay scale, while Republicans believe the taxes are too high for everyone. Americans are also concerned with their own budgets paying taxes for many in an unpopular event we face every spring. However, demand for government services is always high and continues to increase. As our congressman, how would you vote when it comes to tax policy? And in your opinion, what would be the fairest for all of us? We'll go with 90 seconds for Alan LaPolice.
Cut taxes. I'm the guy. Cut taxes, but something we should know, a little history lesson. The 3 decades following World War II, we cultivated the greatest economy that the world has ever known. We built the largest middle class that the world has ever known, and we had a progressive tax structure. And at the time, for those 3 decades, corporations paid 55% of all federal revenue. 55% of the money that the government used to fund government services was funded by corporations. And in the past 3 decades, the corporations have written the tax policies. The tax code went from about 12,000 pages to 96,000 pages since 1980. Who wrote those laws? It wasn't the IRS, so stop pointing the finger at the IRS. It was written by legislators, and they were writing these tax policies at the behest of their lobbyists. They were written by Wall Street. They were written by corporations. And that's why corporations pay the smallest amount of federal revenues at this point in time. And that's why corporations have loopholes that they can invert to Ireland and pay virtually no taxes. Monsanto can consolidate with Bayer, and they can move over to Germany and have a 0% tax liability while still holding the patents to all of our seed products, all of our seed stock. The tax policy is written by corporations. It's written by legislators who are they're beholden to their donors. And until that changes, I want to change that. I want to bring them back online. I'll give them back their tax deductions, but I'll do it the way Eisenhower did. If you want job growth, you create incentives. You give them the tax cuts after they create jobs growth or after they hire new American employees. Domestic production leads to domestic consumption. It's a virtuous cycle. The tax code is written for them. I'll write it for you.
90 seconds for Roger Marshall.
Certainly simpler is better. It seems that the government tends to make the simple complicated, but my job as a leader is to make the complicated simple. I do foresee the ability someday for the average person to be able to do all their income taxes on the back sheet of a postcard. I think number 2 is you need to realize that federal tax policy does not always equal the same outcomes as different state tax policy. One of the biggest problems we have is a corporate tax rate of 35%. And consequently, many large corporations have moved their headquarters out of the continental United States to other countries. We have to get competitive and lower the corporate tax rate down to 20%. If we do that, that's going to bring lots and lots of jobs back to this country and allow these businesses to do business here again and motivated to do that. So corporate tax policy is different than individual tax policy. From an individual tax policy, I talked about simpler. I would also probably bring it down to 3 or 4 tax brackets and make it a little bit flatter, but simpler is the main issue. The state tax policy dealing with LLCs, those are a whole different issue. I've talked to lots of people who have LLCs, and we all say, and I say we, I had an LLC before they ever did the new cuts. But we all want to pay our fair share of taxes at the state level to ensure adequate education. So those are some very simple, straightforward, meat and potato answers. There's more if you want to Google Speaker Paul Ryan and Better Way. He has about 2 pages of tax policy ideas on how to make it better.
And I need to stop you there. Sorry about that, Dr. Marshall. But both of you have focused on taxes in this last comment, or these last 2 answers, and you use those as spurs for job creation. But generally speaking, taxes aren't the only way that jobs are either hindered or created. So I'd like to extend that next, and we'll go for 90 seconds to Dr. Marshall, is outside of the tax policy, what can Congress do to help create more and better American jobs?
I said this in my opening statement. The biggest impediment to a growing economy is government overregulation. So the number 1 thing the government can do is decrease the darn regulations we have. In healthcare, it's causing your healthcare costs to go up significantly. I used to have 3 nurses in my office. Now I have 5 nurses do exactly the same thing. I've seen the Dodd-Frank bill implemented in our own bank, and I've seen it now causing banks in small towns to no longer be able to do home loans. Both of those laws are creating consolidation, which decreases competition. So the number one thing I can do in this Congress to grow jobs is to decrease federal regulations.
All right, 90 seconds for Mr. LaPolice.
I have to address Speaker Paul Ryan. Speaker Paul Ryan started his career working for Sam Brown back 20 years ago. Speaker Paul Ryan's Better Way, which I've read in detail, it's light, but I've read it. It used to be called the Roadmap. Just so you know, it used to be called the Roadmap, which we know has done so much economic growth for Kansas. You can keep giving tax incentives to corporations, and they'll keep doing what they're doing, seeking out the lowest possible wages, because you don't tie their hands and say, you guys can't do that. You guys can't offshore all these jobs. You can't use these loopholes to your advantage. Now, I'm not talking regulation. I'm talking incentive to make domestic jobs creation. Domestic manufacturing, you take away all those ridiculous loopholes and deductions that they've got now, and you feed them back. One at a time, and you say, when you create domestic jobs, we give you back those deductions. GE pays an effective rate of how much? 0. Multi-billion-dollar corporation, they pay 0, because they get to write everything off. But they don't do it, they buy all their wind towers from China. We don't tell them how to spend the incentives that we're giving them. We can, and we should. And the number one new jobs program that I'd like to create, we have a crumbling infrastructure, ladies and gentlemen, and I want to incorporate infrastructure investment into defense, just like Dwight D. Eisenhower did when he built the interstate highway system. We incorporate infrastructure and we create tens of thousands, if not millions, of new private sector jobs, and we spend that defense money on real defense, American defense, fixing our waters, fixing our ports, fixing our roads, fixing schools and bridges and highways and all of that.
Okay, need to stop you there. Thank you.
That was my stuff.
Very good. Then let's move on. We'll have 90 seconds for Mr. LaPolice next. And oftentimes when I do these, I will focus on foreign policy and the issues of terrorism later on in the process. But I had to move it forward today because a few days ago, a plot involving domestic terrorists was uncovered in Garden City. I'd like you to comment on this type of act occurring in the U.S., including other crimes, such as those recently in San Bernardino, California, and Orlando, Florida. What's your opinion of the general internal threat level to this country that terror brings to the U.S. and even here in the state of Kansas? Mr. LaPolice.
The threat level is high, but it always has been. We live in a free society and we take some risk, calculated risk. But I have to say this, the domestic terrorism is on the rise because, same thing I said in my opening remarks, we don't trust our government. We hate our government. We have people right now that are being told that their government is rigging the election or that their government's stealing from them or they're coming to take their guns. We've been fed fear, a steady diet of fear for the past 2-3 decades. And you can't expect people not to act out on that. There are people that are mentally unstable. Now, these 3 men in Garden City, they were unstable, they were unbound, and they were criminals. And they should go to jail for a very long time. But what do you expect to happen when you have such a bitterly divided nation that hates their own government and that fears immigrants? My wife is sitting right here. My wife is an immigrant from El Salvador. She was born in El Salvador during the Civil War, and her mother saw that they were going to die if they didn't leave. But back in the 80s, we had a good immigration policy, and they came here on the sanctuary plan. They came here as refugees, and everything in this world that I hold dear is right there. And she's an immigrant. She was a refugee from El Salvador. When we tell people that these immigrants, these refugees, are going to kill you, when we say that they're bad peanuts or they're bad grapes or they're bad Skittles, what do you think those unbound people will do? They get extreme. They get radicalized. We're radicalizing our own people. And until we can restore some trust in government, until we can do what's right.
Sorry, we've run out of time there. Julie's called that in, so we'll turn it over to Roger Marshall. 90 seconds for you.
Again, national security is the number 2 concern of Kansans and people across the country. It is truly the number 2 concern. Number 1, here's my solution. I would declare war on radicalism. We have to call it exactly what it is, declare war on them. We need to quit micromanaging the military. I did special training for Desert Storm. I understand their culture. This will be a very ugly war. It'll be not something that we want to see played out on TV. We need to take the handcuffs off our military, declare war on radical Islam, and take the battle to them. Number two, we need to secure our borders. Securing the borders is part of an immigration plan, but the first thing we have to do is secure our borders for the country to have faith in the rest of us. The next thing I would talk about is mental health. I'm embarrassed of what this country is doing with mental health right now. People that we used to have in state hospitals and institutions are now wandering the streets. Our local homes are now full of people, full of homeless people. This country spent $200 billion last year on mental illness and only $120 billion on cancer treatment, but yet we haven't done a very good job of taking care of the mental illness type of people. So those are three different solutions I would bring forward.
All right, thank you both. We'll have another 90 seconds here for Roger Marshall. And considering that those domestic terrorists, with the weapons that they had, it really highlighted one of the most important areas of division between the two presidential nominees. That's their respective stances on guns. With a strong Second Amendment tradition, but a string of gun-related acts of senseless violence in the U.S., Congress will likely be the locus of any decisions regarding gun ownership and regulation. Is the current regime of gun regulation adequate to ensure the safety of the American public? Roger Marshall.
As most people know, I'm a lifetime member of the NRA. I don't want any new legislation for gun control. I'd be more fearful of the unintended consequences of any type of gun control legislation as opposed to actually helping the situation. And instead, what I would propose is, I think if we declared war on radical Islam, that's going to remove a lot of the wannabe terrorists out of the schools and out of the systems. And then number two is going back to my mental health issue, that we turn our back on people that are mentally insane, that are mentally handicapped. Mentally handicapped is a bad word. People with mental illnesses that are out of control. They're wandering the streets, they're not taking their medicines, and they're very dangerous people. So I'm not in favor of any type of new gun control rules.
Alanopolis.
I have to address that too. Radical Islam is an ideology, and I'll say it. I'm not a coward to say radical Islam. It's an ideology. You talk about this military experience, and I call into question the military experience. You were in the military as an obstetrician, correct? I was in the military as an infantryman. I fought in the Gulf War. I fought these people on the front line. I saw men die, my friends. I saw them die. We had to carry bodies. So I know a bit more about them than someone who did 2 weeks of training for Desert Storm, Desert Shield, because I was in Desert Storm. I fought. You can't keep saying this stuff. You can't keep saying, let's declare war on an ideology, because that doesn't work. It's like declaring a war on fear. You can never beat fear. You can never beat terrorism. What you can do is you can abate it, and you can educate it out, and you can train the next generation not to use it. We've been dropping bombs in that region for 15 solid years, and it's not working. And we can double down on that. We can keep dropping bombs, and we can keep radicalizing people, because that's what we're doing, or we can come up with a plan. We can end this war. We can declare a war on the people, on ISIS, and we can destroy ISIS, because ISIS is only 30,000 radical nut jobs, and we can get rid of them in 3 days. I guarantee it. But it's too profitable to do that. And we're too eager to declare war on the entire ideology of terrorism and a war on a faith, Islam. Nearly 2 billion people, Islam. You can't do that successfully. So I defended the Second Amendment in combat. I'll defend every other amendment, because that's what a true patriot does.
Afraid I have to stop you there, but thank you. And we'll stay with you on this next question. And I'm again going to circle back to something that you referenced a little bit ago, and that's the topic of immigration. So recently, the U.S. Supreme Court deadlocked on a ruling regarding President Obama's plans to allow millions of undocumented immigrants to remain in the U.S., keeping a lower court ruling in place that blocked the president's actions. Congressional Republicans have long derided President Obama's executive overreach, but he claims that inaction by Republicans on immigration reform forced his hand. So please describe your vision for immigration reform in the U.S. How would you handle the millions of people living without legal citizenship in the U.S. currently?
The president was right. This isn't politically the correct thing to say, but the president was right, because he made executive action overreach, and I'll admit it was overreach, because of inaction in Congress. You see, Congress for decades has been addressing, or failing to address, true immigration reform, because they don't want to touch it. It's the third rail. House Majority Leader Eric Cantor, 2 years ago, he addressed it. He brought it up because he knew immigration was a responsibility that he had to address. And you know what happened? He got beat in his primary. The second rankingest member of the Republican Party lost his primary seat to an unknown nobody from out there because he was willing to address immigration reform. It's cowardice not to address immigration reform. 11 million undocumented immigrants in this country. We have to address it. I don't know what the answer is. I don't have that kind of crystal ball, but I know you can't put them on a plane and send them out because it would take 10 years with 50 DC-10s every single day. I mean, you can't do it. You have to address what's here. You have to address the people. You have to document. So I believe in documenting. I believe in securing our borders through technology, 21st century technology, not 7th century Chinese wall technology. I believe in a pathway to citizenship for those who are productive and who've been living here and they have children here and they go to school here, many of them maybe even in this community. I believe that we have to address it because we're not cowards, and I'm not worried about losing a primary or a general because I'm willing to do my job. Immigration needs to be addressed and it needs to be reformed.
Perfect timing. Roger Marshall, 90 seconds to you.
This is one of the biggest issues I've tried to address, and to do this, I think I visited there's like 15 feedlots and 3 or 4 big dairies and lots of farming operations. It is a huge issue for Kansas, and the mistake that many politicians do is they look at problems in little vacuums. But immigration is a very multifaceted problem. First and foremost, it's a national security issue. Beyond that, it's a job issue, it's an economy issue, it's an education issue in this state. So I tried to address the problem from all different sets of eyes, and for many months now I've been saying very clearly, number one is we need to secure the border. Number two is we need to enforce the laws of our lands. And number three is we need a simpler immigration policy, a simpler immigration work visa program specifically. When I went out and investigated, I asked, why would people circumvent the system and not do it the right way? And I found out that it would take 5 or 7 years to, quote, do it the right way. So meanwhile, you're sitting in Mexico, there's a drug war going on, there's no jobs available, so families circumventing the system to go get a job. It is impractical to take all the illegal immigrants and round them up and send them back to where they're from. It's not the right thing to do. Kansas economy cannot afford to do it, so let's do the right thing.
All right, thank you both. Since Dr. Marshall mentioned as an education issue in his last statement, I want to dig a little bit deeper into education. National education standards under Common Core have come under fire from conservatives. However, Common Core standards are developed at the local level and apply to a national set of shared education standards, similar to standardized education goals in other countries. And yet America lags behind other developed nations in math, science, and other educational criteria. How will we remain competitive in a global economy without shared national education standards, and what should that policy be?
I'll never be in favor of Washington telling Great Bend, Kansas, Russell, Kansas how to educate our kids. No one cares more about education than we do about our own local kids. I think our kids have been tested to death. We're teaching to test. I don't believe these national standards. I think we have very much a heterogeneous population that's going to drag our scores down to some stance. I very much believe in empowering teachers to teach and the federal government staying out of the way. So I want all the controls done locally as much as possible. You don't want Washington telling you how to teach your kids or how to test your kids. I'll put my publicly educated kids up against anybody. I can tell so many success stories of my own kids going through public school systems and doing very, very well. And it's more than just learning math. What we teach is community skills and leadership skills, entrepreneurial skills, skills that cannot be measured on the average test.
Thank you. 90 seconds to Alan Law Police.
On this, I agree. I fully agree. I was never for the Common Core. I despise No Child Left Behind. I loathe the high-stakes summative assessments and then the evaluations that are used for teachers after. I know a little bit about education. 15 years of my life, I was an educator. I taught for 6 years. I was a superintendent for 4 years. I was a principal for 4 years. I was a superintendent for a year. I've been working at the community college recently. I've dedicated the vast majority of my working career to education. And I've always fought against NCLB and Common Core and the idea that the federal government can mandate how we teach. Teachers know how to teach. They are trained, they are licensed, they are professional, and they are amazing. Everybody who's anybody had a teacher, and that teacher inspired them. So while I support the federal government being involved at the level of Title I funding, which is your socioeconomic and language learning funding, so that everybody has an opportunity, equal opportunity is what I believe in, not equality of outcome, but equality of opportunity. I believe in the IDEA. I believe that individuals with disabilities should get federal funding so they have the same shot at success. I believe in the school lunch program, something that my opponent and Congressman Muleskamp absolutely want to radically remove from the Farm Bill. But what do farmers create? Well, we create food. And what do kids need to nourish their bodies? They need food. So I would never take that out of the Farm Bill. I support the federal funding of public education, but not a single mandate, not a single guideline. All decisions are local control for me.
All right, gentlemen, thank you both very much. We're starting to get some questions from the audience, and so I'm going to start bringing those in. And we have, I believe it's Harold Courtois, has asked, what's your position on the Trans-Pacific Partnership? We'll start with Alan LaPolice. You've got 90 seconds.
This is awesome. Here's the deal, folks. I don't have to answer the question that my donors tell me to answer. I don't have the obligation to say TPP means new jobs and it means that beef prices will go up, because that's not true, because it's a lie. TPP was negotiated in private. It's not a trade agreement. It's an investor's agreement. It was written by about 40 corporations and CEOs in private with the help of Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. It is a deeply flawed piece of legislation. It's not a trade agreement. Much akin to NAFTA, only worse. Because with TPP, the signing nations give up their sovereignty, allowing anyone in the world to sue them if they feel their profits have been infringed. Any reason at all. So if the cigarette company wants to say those warning labels make our products less valuable, they can sue our government. You know who pays? You do. That's what TPP will do for you. That's all it will do for you. It will not increase the price of cattle. It will not create domestic jobs, because with these trade agreements, again, labor always goes to the cheapest country, the country that can provide the cheapest labor, and that's not America, folks. Of the 12 member nations that are going to sign on, we have agreements with 6 of them already. Of the other 6, some of them being Vietnam and Brunei, we're going to get tariffs removed on pork. They're Muslim. We don't need that tariff removed. We're not selling them any pork. TPP is a very bad deal, but the Farm Bureau won't let me tell you that. Okay. But I don't have to do it for them.
You're out of time there, so 90 seconds in rebuttal from Dr. Roger Marshall.
TPP would be huge for Kansas. As you all know, we're suffering through depressed commodity prices and cattle prices. What TPP would do is put a straitjacket on China. Right now, China is manipulating all the markets and causing depressed prices. Without any mistake about it, TPP would increase the number of cattle sales as well as all of our commodity sales. When you start increasing your markets, what's that going to do to price? It's going to increase the price by opening up new markets. It's very elementary, without any doubt. That's why Kansas Farm Bureau, KLA, National Sorghum, National Wheat, they all are in favor of TPP. I think it would be very, very good for the Kansas economy. It puts a straitjacket on China, and it's the right thing to do.
Now comes a tough question, I'm sure, as I'm sitting here with 2 candidates who have, at previous times or currently, run on the Republican ticket. At least in my lifetime, the most divisive Republican nominee or president is leading the party into its campaign charge in Donald Trump. Trump has put together a string of statements and activities that are highly divisive and has led to what is unprecedented, at least in the modern age, defection from support by Republicans as well. Your position on Donald Trump and his position as a representative of your party and the party on which you ran 2 years ago. We start with Roger Marshall. And will you support him or are you endorsing him, and would you support him were he to win the presidency? Sorry, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not a Donald Trump apologist, but I could never support Hillary Clinton. I take the issues of battered women and sexual abuse very, very serious. It's something I see in my job every week, unfortunately. But in this country, you're still innocent until proven guilty. In my opinion, Mrs. Clinton has blatantly, purposely broken the law. She had information that was subpoenaed, which she purposely destroyed. So I think her actions speak for themselves. I could never support Hillary Clinton. I will remain true to the Republican candidate. That's not to say that I agree with him on everything he does. I'm very, very concerned about the recent allegations. Pray for our leaders. That's all I can say. He says we need to keep praying for our leaders.
All right, Mr. LaPolice.
As a reformed Republican, I was a Republican 2 years ago. I'm the Republican, like Eisenhower and like Dole and like so many good Republicans before. I can say this. I don't have to endorse anybody. I don't have to endorse the candidate the Republicans put forward. I don't have to endorse the candidate that the Democrats put forward. They have given us a tragic decision to make. Because if you like one of the candidates, trust me, 60% of the country doesn't. However you feel about this candidate, however negative it is, 60% feel that way about your candidate. So we're left, here's the deal. The Republican Party used Mr. Trump in the primary to push, I guess, this agenda. And then they tried to distance themselves. They withheld some of the caucuses, some of the primaries, and they tried to steal the vote from him. That was wrong. And then they embraced him when he became the nominee. That was equally wrong because it was disingenuous. Then they distanced themselves. Then they embraced him again. Do you see a pattern here? The Republican Party is eating itself alive over this nomination. If you like Donald Trump, and you can, it's fine if you do, the thing that he stands for is that he's not part of the establishment. He's not part of the DC insiders. And so I'm not endorsing, but I'm saying the thing about him that you like is that he'll never sell out, right? He's not the establishment. He's going to bring change. And if that's what you're looking for, hi, I'm the independent candidate that will never embrace the establishment. I'm not going to take meetings with Paul Ryan. I'm not going to take money from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I will never sell out. Now, again, not endorsing, don't have to. I think it's a tragic decision to have to make, but if you support Mr. Trump, it's for that reason. I have to say, I'm
sorry
that guy
to
too.
stop you there, and but you will have another 90 seconds. Let's just shift a little bit. And one of the things that Trump has made as kind of a cause célèbre in his campaign is the reestablishment of the Export-Import Bank. It was supported by many in the Republican Party, and yet many conservative legislators, including the outgoing congressman from this district, strongly opposed it. The Ex-Im Bank is an organization with more than 80 years of history supporting U.S. companies by financing the export of American goods and services. At a time when American competitiveness is connected to its ability to encourage export activity, do you support the Export-Import Bank as a mechanism to do that? So why, and if not, what should the replacement policy be? Mr. LaPolice.
I don't. The Export-Import Bank is fondly referred to as the Bank of Boeing. The Export-Import Bank is a vestigial of cronyism. Only those that have access to the Ex-Im Bank really get access. And this gives them unfettered access in world markets. Now, sometimes, in order to make these trade arrangements, you have to have something like a federally backed Ex-Im Bank, or you have to have tons of capital so that you can make the transactions. But unfortunately, Boeing, because they've got real good lobbyists, they get the lion's share of what Ex-Im does, the Export-Import Bank. So that's why we call it the Bank of Boeing. Now, I don't support it in its current form. I don't support it the way that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce supports it, because it is cronyism. Call it what it is, it's cronyism, because only certain people have access to it, and it allows them unfettered world access. I would reform the Export-Import Bank. I wouldn't give access to these big places like Boeing or these massive corporations, but I'd give access to the people that need it. The startups, the entrepreneurs, the mid-level sub-corporations that are just trying to get their hands into the global markets, and they need the Export-Import Bank. But as it stands right now, it's cronyism, and until we start addressing it, until we start reforming it, it's going to overtake us.
Dr. Marshall.
The most important function of the Export-Import Bank to Kansas is it helps agriculture, and that was never mentioned in that argument. It helps open up new world markets. It helps gets our commodities to the market. So the Export-Import Banks are very good for cattle and for agriculture products in general. I wish it was a perfect rule, but it's not. So right now we have Brazil and China playing games and subsidizing their farmers. So the Export-Import Bank helps level the playing field and gives our farmers, our local hardworking cattlemen and farmers, opportunity to get their goods across the seas and to other countries. So export-imports are great. Export-Import Bank is great for farming and for agriculture. And the interesting thing is it's self-sufficient. When it's ran properly, it does not cause the American consumer any extra money. They should be able to pay their own way.
It's a great segue into the next question that I wanted to ask, and it's appropriate to stay with Dr. Marshall, because I think it's fair to say that in your primary victory over Congressman Huelskamp, the issue of agriculture was fairly central. Absence of Congressman Huelskamp on the Agriculture Committee contributed to that significantly, since the big first had lacked a voice on the House Ag Committee since Huelskamp's removal a few years ago. If you're elected, what are your agriculture priorities for the coming Congress? Marshall.
Well, thanks. First and foremost, I want to decrease regulation on farming. I want to decrease issues like waters of the U.S. and prairie chicken issues. Number one is we need to decrease federal regulation. Number two is we need to promote trade, which we've already talked about. Number three is just promote the economy in general. If we have a stronger, better economy, there's going to be more demand for all the things that we do have. I could talk about ethanol for another 20 minutes. So I think ethanol is a great solution and also good for agriculture. So I will continue to promote ethanol as a great fuel source. Transportation and infrastructure is very important as well to agriculture. Getting our goods to market is very, very important. So I will have a big stress. Besides being on the Agriculture Committee, I hope that I can get on the Transportation Committee and help impact the ability of our farmers and cattlemen to get their goods to market.
Mr. LaPolice.
In the primary, the major thing that you addressed was crop insurance, and it was the gold standard, or no, it was the holy grail, and that was the only distinction between Congressman Huelskamp and Dr. Marshall, and that was the thing that was pushed again and again and again. But recently, I've taken the bold step of saying what crop insurance is. Crop insurance is welfare. Crop insurance is a subsidy. Now, it's a necessary subsidy because it's part of the broader safety net that we need, but it is a subsidy, and the way it's written into the current Farm Bill is it creates price supports. So if the commodities prices drops below a certain level, then this subsidy kicks in. And all these farmers that could figure out, they could navigate the new Farm Bill, the different forms that they had, PLC or ARC, they could get subsidies, billions of dollars in subsidies. That's never been my farm policy. Farmers don't need a safety net so much as they need trade policy. They don't need a subsidy so much as they need the country to have good open markets. I was the first person to advocate opening trade with Cuba over 2 years ago. Open trade with Cuba, it's an island nation. They will buy our beef, they will buy our pork, they'll buy our grains, they'll buy our stuff. I'm advocating opening trade with Iran. That's very dangerous to say because we hate Iran. We don't hate the people, we hate their government. But we can definitely trade with the people and eventually showing them our Western style economy, we can help them to elect better government. So what farmers need is good trade policy. They also need technology. They need good water policy. They need immigration reform. They need regulation reform. But safety net, it's the last thing on my list. It's the piece that I'd like to do without if I could.
Need to stop you there, but I'm worried that somehow the two of you can see my notes because you seem to see the questions that are coming. And you mentioned Cuba, Mr. LaPolice.
Yes, sir.
The last 3 years have seen a significant easing of the formal diplomatic tensions between the U.S. and Cuba. A limited relaxation of the travel limitation has been followed by trade embargo erosions that some hail as a new commercial opportunity and others deride as an endorsement of the bloody Castro regime that has ruled the nearby island nation with an iron fist for more than half a century. Is relaxing trade restrictions the right approach for the U.S. to take on Cuba? I want to give both of you full time for that, so 90 seconds, starting out with Alan LaPolice.
Absolutely. Like I said, over 2 years ago, I advocated that when the Pope came out and said, let's normalize trade, let's take care of it, let's be humanitarians. We are a very humanitarian nation. We are a Christian nation. We're a God-fearing, helping nation. Normalizing trade with Cuba is a humanitarian thing to do. It's not advocating for the dictators of that regime. Almost 6 decades, we've had the same embargoes, we've had the same sanctions, we've had the same nonsense policy. And again, how long do you have to do something before you realize that it's the wrong thing to do? It's the wrong approach. Now people are catching on. Maybe if we normalize trade, we give them our Kansas beef products, we give them our grain sorghum, and we give them our corn and wheat, and we give them the things that we produce here, and we give them a taste of our culture. Maybe they can overthrow their own despotic governments on their own. And they will, trust me, they will. Same is true with Iran. We need to open up trade. We need to normalize relations. That's the only way that you can make change. It's the only way you can do anything good. And again, 2 years ago I said this, and no one else would say this because they didn't want to say, we're going to trade with Cuba. Why not? It's cowardice not to. I'm going to say it again. We should normalize trade with Iran. We should provide them medicines so the people can be treated for diseases and for what's wrong with them. We're not giving credit to their government. We're trying to bring their people back to us. So yes, open up trade.
Dr. Marshall.
Yes, I'm also very much in favor of opening up trade with Cuba. Another great example of the Export-Import Bank that help us get those markets open, since Cuba will have problems financing that themselves. So this is a great opportunity for the United States. Certainly the policy we've been using for decades has not been working. Very much in favor of a long-term solution, so long-term policy. What the American farmer hates is when we get a country like Cuba back in the market for 2 years, we all start growing extra wheat, and then they take it away from us. So we need some type of long-term solutions rather than just give it and take it as the government tends to do.
All right.
I can't see my prompts.
Okay. Well, this next one goes to Dr. Marshall anyways, and let's focus on the doctor part for a moment, because since its passage in 2010, the Republican Party position has been to repeal and replace the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act that we commonly now know as Obamacare. This has been the position of Donald Trump, the Republican presidential nominee as well. In the absence of the ACA, specifically, what form should healthcare policy take in the United States under a new president? Dr. Marshall.
Well, of course, like I've said, healthcare is the #3 concern of people in Kansas and everyone across the country. Whatever company you're working for, 1/6 of your budget is going towards healthcare. I don't have to tell you all how much your policy, your premiums have gone up over the past 2 years, how much pharmacy prices are going up. There is a physician caucus in Washington, D.C. made up of 17 physicians. And I've sat down with them on several occasions, and I went to D.C. with 7 incremental steps that I thought we could start chipping away at this apple. You know, this concept of taking one bite of the apple at a time, and both those issues up and down. And I alluded to several of those in my opening statement. Simple things like letting healthcare be bid across state lines. That'll increase competition. Whenever there's increased competition, it's going to drive prices down, and the customers, the patients, are the one that will benefit from it. I would allow for portability of healthcare. So if you move from Kansas to New Jersey, you could take your health insurance with you. Healthcare savings accounts are something most people are familiar with. I would expand those. Tort reform. About 10% of the doctor's budget is going towards malpractice. About 5% of a hospital's budget is going towards malpractice premiums. But what we're forgetting about is all the unnecessary tests that are being ordered in the emergency room because of people that overuse our emergency rooms. I would repeal this idea that you have to have health insurance. I think that when there's ever strict rules like that from the federal government, they never seem to work out well. And I could
Sorry to stop you there and hand it
so
over
thanks.
to
There's
Mr.
lots of
LaPolice.
opportunities to fix it.
Mr. LaPolice, 90 seconds on health care for you.
It needs to be reformed, absolutely. And my opponent has said multiple times that who would better know than a physician. But I'll point out that Dr. Marshall's profited millions and millions of dollars from the existing healthcare. Early in the campaign, he was for Medicaid expansion because it would save lives, but then because of political necessity and Congressman Huelscamp's direct attack on it, he backed out of Medicaid expansion, claiming that it wasn't a good thing. But it is a good thing, people. It's a political maneuver by our governor to make you believe that he's trying to stop something that he has no plan on. And in that process, hospitals have closed and patients have died. So yeah, we need healthcare reform. The ACA isn't it. The ACA is government run. I'm a 10th Amendment guy, so it's not the federal government. We should put it down to the states. My replacement would be something very much like what Mitt Romney did in Massachusetts. But do it across the United States, 50 states. There's a baseline. They have to cover people. You can't be denied if you have a pre-existing condition. You can't be thrown off. You can let your kids stay on until they're a certain age. But the problem with the ACA is, like you said, you can't bid across state lines. Do you know why? Because the healthcare lobby prevented them from putting that in there. And the pharmaceutical prices are too high, and we can't negotiate pricing. And do you know why? Because the pharmaceutical lobby put that in there. The ACA was written mostly by these lobbyists for profit. And until we can address that, until we can address the fact that they pass legislation that they buy, we're never going to address the root of the problem. I say Romney care for all. Let the states decide, let the government make sure they're doing it, and that's the way to fix it. But you've got to negotiate farms
I have
to
to stop you there, and unfortunately, we have time for only one more question before we move to our closing statements. So we'll direct this to Mr. Law Police. This is something particularly of note to me, because just today, as I was reading my news, it was revealed that Yahoo had scanned hundreds of millions of user emails without warrants for the NSA and the FBI. Concerns for privacy and civil liberties were raised by the revelation. Has America's cybersecurity regime gone too far into the realm of restricting liberty for the sake of more cyber intelligence?
Yep. Yes, it has. He that would give up essential liberty for some temporary security deserves neither. In fact, we live in a world where we have to give up a little bit of that sense of security because we have liberty. We're in a nation that we value liberty above all else, and we can't let our government spy on us. It's a violation of the Constitution. In the cyber war, in their data mining that they've been doing for decades now, but with legislation, with all of the data mining that they've done, you know how many terrorist attacks they stopped? It's zero. They haven't stopped any. What they did out in Garden City was different. That was local police, and that was a little bit of a sting at the federal level, but it wasn't done by the NSA or the CIA or our intelligence apparatus. This stuff, this government stuff, this is where my libertarian friends all say, yeah, we're with you. We can't allow a government to spy on us like that so that we can feel safe. It doesn't work. It hasn't worked, and we've invested billions, if not trillions, into something that is theater. Folks, it's political theater. It's called security theater, and they do it at the airport. They make you feel safe. They give you that sense of safety. But in the time that the TSA has been screening and taking off your shoes, they've caught nobody. But I think there's something like 158 TSA workers that were caught stealing people's stuff, but when they went to their bags. So we've got to address this issue, and it's not by allowing our government unfettered access to our private information. It's about liberty, and it's about freedom.
Perfect timing, and we'll go to 90 seconds for Roger Marshall.
Yeah. Just for the record, Rodney Care was perhaps one of the greatest governmental financial disasters in the history of the country. Second of all, for the record, Allen Law Police begged for the U.S. Chamber endorsement 3 years ago.
I would say beg.
That's the term they use, is beg. So anyway, back to this issue. Of course, I'm going to err on the side of liberty. Always err on the side of liberty. There's ways to get warrants for this type of thing, and no one's above the law, so they all need to follow the current law, which is you would need a warrant to get any type of private information.
All right, unfortunately with that, we're out of time for questions, so we'll move to our closing statements, and we have 2 minutes for Dr. Roger Marshall's closing statement. The floor is yours.
Well, thanks so much. If I were in your seat, and I am in your seat, trying to figure out who am I voting for president or for senator or whatever, I want to know a couple things about the candidate. I want to know how they think. How do they process information? And as a physician, that's something I do 20, 30, 40, 50 times a day, often life and death situations. I think that would be a great experience to take to Washington, D.C. The second thing I would want to know about the person, more than just their policies, and I've tried to answer policy statements pretty much as matter of fact as I can, but I want to know the person's values. If you would ask my family, the most important values we have is faith, family, community, and education. A strong faith, a loving family, a caring community, and education as a priority. I'm a first-generation person from my family to go to college. I value education so very much. I think it is the pathway to improve your economic status. In Kansas, there's 30,000 open jobs now. Could you imagine if I walked into Topeka and said, I'm bringing in a company with and I have 30,000 jobs. I bet I would get a hero's welcome. But we have those jobs right now. Our community colleges, our tech colleges, our university, we're poised to help educate these people and fill these jobs. No matter what problem we talk about, whether it's national security, schools, infrastructure, if we don't get this economy going again, there's no money to pay for any of this. When I look at every problem, I'm going to look at it through, first of all, a national security lens, and then second of all, as an economic lens. I want to see a benefit and risk. I want to see a cost and benefit analysis. I want to lead this country to be a stronger country. I want to lead this country better than I found it. Thanks for hosting us today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Dr. Marshall. Last word to Allen Law Police.
I also want to thank you, and I thank Dr. Roger Marshall for participating in this, or subjecting himself to my attacks. I go back to my opening statement, something different. Dr. Roger Marshall is a hell of a good guy. I've known him for 2 years. He reached out to me right after the primary 2 years ago. He's a good guy, and he knows what he wants, and that's fine. But if you listen to him, and if you listen long enough, nothing that he says is new. Not one single thing. Let's get the corporate tax rate down, okay? So that they can continue to offshore their jobs, and there's no straitjacket for the companies that are paying for the campaign. And the fact that the U.S. Chamber is willing to back him, I know what they demanded. The reason they didn't give me the endorsement, and this is a true story, is because I refused to talk their script. I wouldn't back down on TPP. I wouldn't back down on Citizens United. I thought that they were wrong, and when they demanded that I speak their script, I told them where to go, because I wasn't going to be their candidate. I don't have to be anybody's candidate but yours. And until we do something different, you've got to understand, it sounds good what he's pitching. It sounds fine, but it sounds the same. It sounds exactly the same. And until we do something different, we're going to keep getting the same elections. We're going to get worse elections. This presidential election is the worst by far, and this country can't handle more division. He's not going to be able to reach across the aisle, down the aisle, through the aisle, because he's going to go there as a Republican, and he's going to have to support the Republican ideology. I don't. I can go there as an American, a veteran, a true farmer, and a real person who understands the issues. I am not naive. I am not naive to what's going on. I can go there and create a bipartisan caucus with 25 to 30 of the best R's and 25 to 30 of the best D's. And believe me, folks, they are there. They just don't have the language to talk in the middle because they're scared of their party leadership. I'm not. I'm not scared of anything. My greatest asset, I'm not afraid to lose. I'm here today to tell you my name's Alan LaPolice, and I'll be your representative, and I'll be something different. God bless you all.
Well, gentlemen, thank you both very much, and thanks to all of you who have joined us once again here at the beautiful Dream Theater in lovely downtown Russell, Kansas. Our thanks to Julie Counts and the Russell Chamber of Commerce who have hosted this event, and to Smokey Hills Public Television who will be broadcasting this forum later on. So on behalf of everyone here, thank you all very much, and have a good day.